Okay, good morning, good afternoon, all. I'm very happy to introduce you to Darwin animal doctors. But before we start, I will just make, together with Claire, an introduction of the various people attending this webinar. So perhaps we can start with Claire. Claire, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Okay, so well, I've been sort of vegan or vegetarian throughout my adult life, and my business is now within the vegan sphere, mostly involved in investing and also creating a tech platform to join the vegan community and connect the vegan community together and enable funding of vegan businesses.
Very good. And it's called Beyond Animal?
That one is, yeah. And the investing platform is Beyond Investing. Okay,
very good. Thank you, Claire. Amal, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Amel from the Rabat, Maroc. We are a network composed by several associations all around Morocco, and we work on the concept of One Health. And also with a Darwin doctor, we are part of the IETC, who is the Animal Issue Thematic Cluster in the major group of the United Nations, working on pushing the question of animal welfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amal. And you did not come on your own, Valerie. Valerie, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Valerie from Rabat, Morocco also. And I have also a shelter for handicapped animals in the rural area of the country.
Very good. Thank you, Valerie from Rabat, Maroc. Gorette, can you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Gorette Neves du collectif Chat Stérilisation Obligatoire.
All right. How would you translate that, Claire? Stérilisation.
I represent a collective of 600 associations, and together we mobilize to make better the life of cats.
Okay,
very good.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gorette. So I'll go on to Eloise. Hi, Eloise. Eloise, I think I don't hear you. Okay, for the moment, we've got an issue with the sound. I can't hear you. So a bit later on. Séverine, bonjour Séverine. Hi, Séverine.
I'm in charge of so-called Collectif Outre-mer des Protections Animales, which has partner associations. Well, j'allais dire le siège, je sais plus comment on dit. Je cherche le mot, mais je sais plus. Well, it's based in mainland France, but we have partner associations in Guadeloupe, French Guyana, and all the associations on the Réunion Island and Martinique. And we save animals, mainly companion animals, because there are many dog and strays there, mainly.
Okay, thank you, Séverine. Perhaps Tara, would you like to introduce yourself? Tara Clark.
Tara, I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you
Tara?
hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi. I'm Tara Clark. I'm a lecturer at North Carolina State University. And I'm also a volunteer with Darwin Animal Doctors. I'm the chief primatologist in charge of conservation.
She's also about 10 feet away from me. This is her.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara, for being here. Fabienne. Hi, Fabienne.
She's on mute as well, I think.
Hello.
Hi, Fabienne.
Français comme Gorette.
Yes, okay. Do it in French and Claire will help us with the translation.
D'accord. Bonjour, moi je suis élue et, comment je dirais, directrice de campagne pour un des candidats de la ville de Paris. Et je travaille à faire progresser les politiques sur la question animale. Et je suis très intéressée sur la question des trafics d'animaux sauvages, c'est-à-dire l'importation des animaux sauvages, les politiques à mener pour bloquer ça et la question des NAC. Moi, je suis favorable à essayer d'en finir avec les NAC exotiques, donc les nouveaux animaux de compagnie, comme la panthère d'Armentières, et le dernier, c'est un petit caïman qu'on a retrouvé dans une rivière française.
All right. Can you remember something, Claire?
Yeah, I think I should have been making notes. Yes, she's supporting a candidate for the town of Paris, so a political candidate who is particularly involved in the cause of animals, and the focus is to reduce the trafficking.
Join the meeting.
The trafficking of wildlife. And I'm afraid I missed the last bit about the particular animals, but there was an animal that was found in a river, apparently, that was a wild animal, an exotic animal that really shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, yes, what Fabienne also said is she's interested in anything regarding animal trafficking, and exotic animals.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Fabienne. Thank you, Claire. Have I missed someone? Serena, can you introduce yourself, Serena?
Yes. So I have a travel agency specialized in eco-volunteering. So it's where people can travel and work in animal protection project at the same time. So it's great to see wild animals and help a project.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Eloise, is your sound working now? Can you try again? Otherwise.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Is it okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm Eloise. Hello, everybody. And I've quit my job to create a company called Dog Friday. And our goal is to change the mentality in corporate companies about our animal interaction and relation. And so it's thanks to our network of professionals in therapy animals. We will come in company to improve health and wellness for everybody, and in travel, in daily life, in company.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I did miss someone. I'm not sure you would like to introduce yourself. Shannon, can you hear us? Okay, let's start. Right. Thank you all for the introduction. My name is Yann Toinet. I'm one of the animator of this, let's call it an accelerator, incubator of projects that have a positive impact on animals called i4animals. We shall start now with Todd Emko's presentation, and I invite every one of you to actually shut the micro. Thank you very much, Todd. Very happy to have you today. It's your turn.
And thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for coming, especially today. I know it's a national holiday there, so thanks for taking the time. I know that everyone wants to spend their holidays with a New Yorker, so it's the perfect thing. So I appreciate all of your time today. And it's amazing. All of the things you guys are doing are wonderful. And hopefully a lot of the topics that we talk about today are helpful, informative, and hopefully are things that will inform how we can help each other achieve our goals together. So this is first and foremost who we are. We are Darwin Animal Doctors. Here is our website. I've put in the links in the Zoom chat for our website and our Facebook page and for our Instagram. So this is our website where you can get most of the information about us and have this little guy stare at you. And this is our Facebook page where you can get most of the updates on the day-to-day workings. And then we also have the, this is our Instagram page. I posted the one for our humane education and wildlife program here, A Piggy's Tale, and more about why it's called that in a moment. And you can get all of the day-to-day update photos on things for our lives and what's going on in the rest of the world through our programs. So thank you, everyone. And now let's begin. So this is about Darwin Animal Doctors. We are a worldwide cause that is started by a superhero dog who is currently taking a superhero nap. And here are activist lessons that we can learn from his story and the story of us in general. So today's lessons, and this is the most word-heavy page, so don't worry about it. I'll go over each one in depth. So the first lesson is that it takes an entire community to accomplish all of our activism goals. So things like this, gathering us all together and hearing everyone's work and how everyone can help each other is really important. And then number two, we can support that community through engaging the entire world. And then three, the path to achieving the first and second is storytelling. So first, who am I? Well, obviously we are rebels. And also we will have all of these links here available for you. Later, we are conservationists and we are, well, he is a tripod dog. This is Piggy, and more on him in a minute. Piggy is our founder, and we are also representatives for persons with disabilities. And we are comic book and technology nerds. And all of this will be explained. It'd be funny if we just said, yeah, are there any questions? But let's move on to what each one is. So first of all, most of people who don't know me from Darwin Animal Doctors probably knew me from way back in the Sea Shepherd days, back when there was a TV show called Whale Wars on Animal Planet and Discovery Networks. There was a South Park episode that turned us all into South Park characters. It was greatly flattering, wonderful. But today, we are tackling not just maritime issues, but a huge issue that's going on everywhere, which is how do we make relevant change in critically important locations around the world? There are a lot of problems happening, from rainforests to ocean ecosystems to vulnerable communities that are in charge of precious ecosystems. And how do we make the changes over there, considering who we are over here? So first, let's go over a bunch of things that don't work, which we see all the time. The first is colonial conservation. And for people who are not familiar with what colonial conservation is, it's, long story short, when a bunch of first world people go to a global south country and say, hey, we know what's best for everybody, do as we say or we'll throw you in jail, or we're going to save this ecosystem independently of you by doing X, Y, and Z, and then the locals are left suffering for it all. Another thing that you'll see all the time is inconsequential actions. Things like, this was the first change.org petition I found on this topic, which was a petition to tell all companies in the world to stop using palm oil. And if you sign it, you feel like you've accomplished something in the world. But there's a lot of actions that people take out there that make them feel like they're getting involved with things which don't actually do anything to help the problem. And then finally, and this is harder for people because a lot of people will want to get involved in a campaign or action, but the truth is that single issue campaigns often take issues out of a vacuum and often don't address the fundamental problems that are causing them in the first place. So one example of all three of these are often, if you're involved in anti-poaching, one of the things that you'll find is that you'll go to a precious ecosystem that has a small community that lives in that precious ecosystem. A large conservation group will come in and work with the government to arrest poachers, who are often the locals. And the locals will get very, very resentful of the fact that a bunch of people are coming in and telling them what to do in their own community. And that will often make the issue worse, because then they will start poaching and performing illegal environmental destruction just to make a point that you can't tell people what to do in their own home. So those are the things that don't work, but let's talk about solutions. And this is where our story comes in, and who we are and how we decided to reshape our organization to be a solution. So first of all, who are we? We're Darwin Animal Doctors. We are an organization founded by a dog. So this is Piggy. This is him on the Today Show. That's him in real life. He is our three-legged superhero dog. We found him in the Dominican Republic as a puppy a month after he got hit by a bus. And the locals said, well, you know, there's no veterinary care here most of the year, so if you want to give him a chance to survive, you should take him back with you to the United States. And I said, okay, twist my arm, got a dog. And so I have a three-legged dog now, and he made this amazing recovery here in the United States. But more than that, he was a very, very special puppy. He would do this thing that taught us, you know, what his experience as a puppy suffering after a car accident did for him, which was that he had this superpower ability to detect when people were suffering nearby, like he was suffering before that. And so we would walk him in Central Park, for instance, and then suddenly he would veer off the trail. And out of everybody in the park, he would go up to one person and lay down in front of them and just put his paw on them and look up at them. And they would all do the same thing. They would all cry. They would all pet him and say, how did you know I needed that? And so I'd say things like, you know, are you okay? You know, you're crying, what's going on? And they would say things like, oh, you know, I just lost my best friend. Or they would say things like, you know, my dog just died this morning and your dog could tell and he gave me what I needed. And so I thought, oh my goodness, you know, he's a superhero. So we needed to give him a superhero story and give him superhero training. And so this is him at, on the Sci-Fi Channel. So he has a comic book about his life being a three-legged superhero and using empathy as an actual superpower to allow him to save other people and animals. And that superhero story was also, you know, part of his journey to become an actual service dog. He's also in therapy. He goes to schools and hospitals for children with special needs, and he helps a lot of children. So he's a real life superhero who just saves people. And also he's a superhero in the comic book world. And as the Dodo story about him says, and that's him when we first found him, you know, in being inspired by somebody like this, how can you not think about all the rest of the beings like him out there in the world who could change all these people's lives, who are such an inspirational story, but would never get a chance to because they're just stuck in, you know, a country where they have very little economy and have very little opportunity. And he would have very likely just been one of the countless forgotten dogs on the side of the road to just get hit. So we created a nonprofit out of his story, and that became Darwin Animal Doctors, where we can do what we can to give all of those beings, whether they be animals, whether they be children in villages that don't have very much means, to make the most of their lives and be able to change the world for the better as best they can. He is also the only dog representative of the United Nations. That's him at the General Assembly. Because as Amal was saying, we are all part of the United Nations thematic cluster for animals NGOs, but also Piggy as a three-legged and working dog is a representative of the UN stakeholder group for persons with disabilities. And here he is about to give a speech at the United Nations to the General Assembly. So if you're at the United Nations and you see a dog paying very close attention, that's going to be Piggy. So that's a story of how we were created. Now about our work around the world and beyond. So beyond meaning the United Nations, we do what we can to partner with as many local stakeholders around the world in order to do the work that we do. So we are now in a lot of places in the world, and we would love to be in a lot more, because these are a lot of the places where you know, communities and animals have it really, really rough, and we want to give them all a chance. But of course, you know, people need help everywhere. And we also have the most adorable patients in the world, just to let you know. So if you want to follow us on social media, you will not be disappointed. And so our secret to success, what is it that we do in these places to help and to help turn around the communities and these ecosystems that are in danger? And the secret is that you have to empower the marginalized. So as we were saying before, one of the problems is, you know, if a colonial conservationist group goes to a location and starts trying to basically push around locals and say, you know, this is what it's going to take to fix this ecosystem, and if you do, you know, something that we don't like, then we're going to arrange to have you arrested, etc. You're ignoring the only people, for better or for worse, that can really help this ecosystem and be the stewards of it and take charge of it. And most of the time, when you speak to locals anywhere in the world, the one thing that they want more than anything is a sense of agency, is to feel like they have the ability to take leadership and control of their own community. And that's what any of us want, really. So these are some of the things that we do. That's Tara, who is also on this call. That's her in Madagascar from this past summer, from one of our programs in Madagascar, where we don't just save lemurs, like Floyd over here. Like, well, by the way, he's made of beads and other materials. He's not a stuffed, I didn't just put a stuffed animal, like, you know, a stuffed wild animal over there. In Madagascar, we're building schools where there just weren't any schools before, and giving the children access to education, which is the best way out of poverty, honestly. And in a lot of these places, education is key, because not only is it very rare in a lot of places, like, you know, this was the school that they've been trying to build for like 2 years. And so we're going to do everything we can to like help them build an actual school. And this is a goal that they have on their own. They just don't have the means. And so one thing you find is that people all over the world in these locations, they want to have a future with the environment. They want to save the ecosystem. They want to have education for their kids where they have sustainable careers, but they often don't have the means. And what they see is that a lot of, you know, large international companies are coming in with all the resources, but again, pushing them aside in all things. So by empowering the locals, giving them access to education, and giving them a chance is the best chance any of us have to turning around any of these locations. And so let's get into all of these things specifically that do work. So the path to solution is going to start with education. So this is one of the examples of one of our projects. This is in Puerto Rico. And on the left side here, you'll see a bunch of students from partner programs that we have in schools in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria destroyed so much of the island. Now, the devastation from Hurricane Maria is, you cannot underestimate like how much it's affecting that island still, and how much of the island still doesn't have electricity, access to clean water, etc. We asked a lot of the local groups, how is the international response? How is it going? And a lot of them said, you know, there's a big international response. Thankfully, a lot of people are dropping off supplies, which are badly needed, and they're very thankful. The drawback is that when international groups drop off relief supplies and then leave, they are no more prepared for the next problem than they were before. And they know that there is going to be a next time. They know that climate change is only going to get worse. And so when I asked them, if we partner with you, what do you need? Their answer was, we need a generation of children growing up knowing how to take care of this island. Because the children are going to be the ones that are going to be in charge of everything. And they need to know when something happens, how to take care of it, and how to prevent disaster from destroying their infrastructure. So we partnered with school programs and local Puerto Rican community groups like Harimau Conservation and Proyecto Cabachuelas, which is the wildlife reserve in Morovis in the center part of Puerto Rico. And on the left side there, you can see that part of our program is the children learning through the schools that we're helping rebuild. They're learning earth science, they're learning how to take care of, of ecology that's local to them. They are using their skills to volunteer to rebuild the wildlife reserve. And on the right, you'll see a screenshot from a Telemundo story that played in Latin America about this region of Puerto Rico that's making an economic comeback because, and you can see in the background there, that's the same staircase that these children are cultivating and making, because there is new ecotourism that's bringing back that region economically and sustainably. And it was created by the children. It was created by this education program. So you can see that it has a real immediate effect, and it can help bring back a community and raise up the local simultaneously. Community development is another huge one. So this is from the Galapagos Islands you're seeing, where we've had our longest operations. So we started creating the very first permanent year-round animal hospital in the Galapagos Islands back in 2010. And we've treated maybe at least 20,000 animals since we started. And every year we're at maximum capacity almost every single day, even before we opened our doors in the morning. Just the line outside kept us at max capacity. So after a couple years, I started to try to think what is the real solution to keeping, not just keeping the numbers manageable, but what's the ultimate cause of all of this that's not just tending to the problem after it happens, but actually, solving the problem before it becomes an emergency and we're at maximum capacity all the time. And so the answer is humane education and community development. And so we started pilot programs in schools there, which are now the basis for our programs around the world, where it's all about teaching children humane education, teaching children how to marginalize yet less, teaching children how they can think for themselves, how they can come up with sustainable futures for themselves. This is where we made a lot of breakthroughs. Things like, when we first started there was no year-round humane education at the time. And children there often had a bad reputation of treating animals really badly. And a lot of people warned us that, our humane education efforts might not go well there because a lot of people seeing this at a glance would think that this community doesn't care. But after our first round of humane education pilot programs, a lot of the children themselves started creating their own humane education groups in order to teach adults how and why they should take care of animals. One of the children in the class, David, he was this 15-year-old boy who got the rest of his classmates to create a fake free dog walking service where they would walk adults' dogs for free, but they would use that opportunity to teach the adults how and why they needed to take proper care of their dogs in order to safeguard the wildlife that was there in the Galapagos. And so I was there with our biggest grantor, our biggest benefactor, Lush Cosmetics, because Lush Charity Pot gave us a grant which started our whole humane education program. And so we just said the most natural thing. Oh, well, David, if you need leashes and collars, let us know and we can give you leashes and collars for this business you're creating. And he immediately buried his head into his hands and started crying. And we said, what's wrong? Are you okay? And he said, that question, that simple question, do you need leashes and collars, was the first indication he got that anybody outside of the Galapagos Islands cared about what these locals or what he wanted, or the fact that he wanted to help these animals. And that was a very, very telling moment for us. And that became the basis of how we started approaching all of our programs around the world. And of course, we need to do direct ecological restoration. So this is a screenshot from Sumatra, where we're standing with some of the forest rangers when in the part of the looser ecosystem that used to be palm oil plantations. And after working with a lot of the local groups like Stay Wild doing ecological restoration, we had collectively gained enough trust with the national park to work with them and have them let us help them convert palm oil plantations back into rainforests. And so that area over there is being converted back into the rainforest. And you know, there's a lot of news right now about the wildfires that are consuming Java and Sumatra. And obviously we have to put those fires out. We have to rescue the animals that are in danger. But long term, the only real solution is that we're going to have to work with the locals to create a sustainable future so that they have you know, the infrastructure they need to not be burned out of their homes literally, and have alternatives to palm oil plantations and the conditions that are creating these forest fires every year. And so those are the things that we need to do with those communities. Now, the way that we can make them work is by engaging the entire world, and that's through storytelling. So like we can ask for adoptions and everything around the world, but the way that we can get people invested or involved when they're making like, you know, a monthly donation of like $10, $50 or something, is by giving a story. Like, instead of just, can you donate to us? You know, we really need the money. This is really important. Tell a story about these slow lorises in Sumatra, or tell a story about these lemurs in Madagascar, and how you're not just donating monthly, but you're adopting, you know, an animal that will give you, you know, a plush toy for, like the slow loris, the only one that you're allowed to tickle. And you can get a real story about like how that animal represents a real one in the wild that you're saving through our partner programs to save these injured and homeless, you know, slow lorises and other animals. And also, we really need to work with these communities to help them get the skills to get their message out to the world, because the community is a lot more likely to respond positively if they see and hear the locals themselves tell this. I'm like this New Yorker who's going around telling people, hey, like, you know, this is amazing thing that's going on here. You know, you gotta meet these locals, they're amazing. But honestly, if people see those people in those communities, if they hear the messages coming out from these tiny communities of children like her in a looser ecosystem rainforest village, who's learning English in order to tell her story to the world, so that, because she really wants the world to know that, like, what she's going through and how they can help. It has a lot more impact, and the world is a lot more likely to respond and support them. Here's an example of storytelling. So as we said before, Piggy has his humane education comic book program. That was the Instagram link that we shared. And this is an example of the program. In Greenland, this is a school for severely at-risk children. And they had, like, you know, this is one of those schools where children have like extreme behavioral problems, and this is sort of like their last chance, so to speak. But what we found was that not just here in Greenland, but in a lot of places in the world, children don't really learn by the traditional schooling methods, which we have in compulsory education. Most children learn through visual storytelling. And so when we gave them Piggy's storybooks as part of their humane education, a lot of these kids made a huge turnaround. And like you're seeing here, these children are now making their own comics in order to tell their story, because that's more in line with how children are learning. And so by teaching something very simple, like, you know, here's how to tell your story, just like we're telling this three-legged dog story, and how you can like start to communicate, it opens up these kids more than you could imagine. We have the same program in the United States, and children are, you know, who are, you know, special needs or very young are making comics once they learn how to communicate that no one would have thought that they would have done. We have children making comics about the Lin Festival in China, because it was important to them, and people didn't know that, like, children that young cared about that issue. Or children that you wouldn't have thought of in privileged, you know, schools, saying that I'm going to make a comic about gay marriage problems in the United States, because, like, you know, the people resisting gay marriage is a huge issue here, and it's something that affects me. And these are things that, you know, through traditional education, they would not often have had the opportunity to tell these stories. These are letters that children who are at severely at-risk communities in upstate New York wrote to Piggy. Because a lot of communities that have, severely opioid addicted families or families in jail, they might often have very poor family relationships, and their primary relationship might often be to Piggy through this program. And that tells us a lot about what it takes to help these children have a chance. And now that we've helped these communities take the first step and we're helping them communicate with the world, the next thing is to make those values go viral by making programs that don't just teach them, but also encourage them to keep that as a community value that they teach to other communities nearby. For instance, community festivals. Like we've been supporting the Sumatran community festivals in Sumatra for the last 3 years because it's a way that those children and those communities can not just reinforce and reiterate that their values are for conservation and empathy, but it's how they share that with other communities around them. A lot of indigenous or local communities in precious ecosystems like the rainforest, they don't have movie theaters. They'll often have almost no internet. You'll find that most of their value sharing is through community events. And so we discovered that that's a really key way that we need to spread these values. So it's not just us telling it, but it has to be these locals telling it to other locals as well. Another way is the project-based student activities. This was a photo, one of many from Puerto Rico, from that school program in Morovis at the wildlife reserve that we told you about before, where the children, this was during or right before Christmas vacation, when the children would have been, going on vacation, going with their friends, but instead the children organized and scheduled to put on work gloves and go to the national park and actually, start rebuilding this wildlife reserve in shifts, right around their vacation time, which was hugely inspiring to hear, but also told us about once the children were exposed to what it took and what they could do to take control of their future and their ecosystem, that told us everything. And then the last thing is also help them affect the real world. And this is a really big thing. Like a lot of programs that teach children or work with the community, they teach a lot of, curriculum, which is really important and great. But you really need to get them to have a connection to the rest of their world and also, be linked to the rest of the world as well. So for instance, in Sumatra, where we helped sponsor a lot of ranger patrols, one of the other things that we were able to help sponsor by helping sponsor the forest patrols is say, if you catch a poacher, we can support and sponsor their education to become a conservationist. And so a lot of former poachers and former illegal loggers are making the very best rangers and the very best people to train rangers and end up teaching people, okay, this is how you look for poacher snare traps. This is how you're going to look for hidden poacher supplies that you would not have been able to find formerly. And it's a very powerful thing. Their voice and what they've learned and their forest skills count for a lot, and the world can learn from it. And step 4, and this is the shameless self-plugging. This is how everyone can start making an impact if they want to start making change today. First is a lot of people have been having like their own, children's classrooms, or here in the United States, like the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts programs would have adopted their own Slow Loris program through our monthly sponsorship program. And that's a way that people can make a connection while making a monthly donation and also learn from a program like that. For the people who are interested in investing in eco businesses or programs that help animals, we're working with these rainforest communities that we're building schools with, not just to help them build schools and create their own programs, but to help them create businesses that are sustainable so that they can keep these programs going long after we leave these areas, because we want them to take control of these programs themselves. And so, for instance, in Sumatra, a lot of our local people are making these, through traditional art, these rainforest bracelets out of like local ferns, which is a lot more sustainable an option for them in, isolated non-tourist villages than turning to palm oil plantations, which was often the only other option they have. And by creating businesses that they can sell internationally, we're helping them have a future and also helping those rainforests, which we all count on, have a chance. And then there's also our storytelling. This guy, you can tell that we're talking about him. So Piggy's program to help people learn how to tell their stories, and which also helps our program grow around the world and teach the values that we know need to be taught in order to have these programs go forward. That's a really, really important part of everything. Humane education is the beginning of all of this. And partner with us. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people here are doing. In Morocco, like working with Amal and Valerie to try to get our first pilot programs in impoverished schools there. They're now going to be one of the new partner schools that we have around the world. We have volunteers that need to go to all of these remote places to help train people in sustainable education and sustainable businesses. So if people want to help, eco volunteer tourism, that is a big thing that we could learn to work together. So if everyone wants to help each other grow to the next level, let's do everything that we just learned about in this presentation and help each other get to the next level. And so that is our presentation and also our shameless plug. And I totally forgot to stop every 15 minutes and ask if anyone had questions. So please, let's start that.
All right, thank you, Todd. Very good. Work you've done is very impressive. We shall start now with the questions. I'm going to start with one question. With regards to education, can you go back to your slide on education? My question was, have you seen any states you have intervened, actually taking some of your ideas and try to incorporate them into the education cursus of children?
Yes, and actually that's built into our curriculum. So that's also a really good question, because these things will only work if people in the local areas take them and decide to take off with them and make it their own. So as a part of every school that we help rebuild, part of all of our curriculums is that the children learn how to take care of the local flora and fauna of that area. And the children make nurseries, the children start planting trees and bringing back like caterpillars and local butterflies, local animals and plants. And in every location, the children have become, some of the best movers and shakers, some of the people that have moved these programs forward the most, and the community responds. And so these programs are often things that the community tailors and makes on their own into something that they have ownership of, which is really, really important and a really big goal of ours to have anywhere we work. We don't just want to have a one-size-fits-all program for these places, but we want to have something where the people make it tailored to that community to speak to those kids. And when that happens, and when the community and the children are working together to make that happen, to restore, for instance, this wildlife reserve in Puerto Rico, that's ultimately the end goal. So like the children not just made it their own, they helped bring back a lot of the economy from that region of Puerto Rico.
Okay, all right. So question, perhaps we can start with Rapad Maroc, Amal or Valerie. Valerie, Amal, do you have a question or a comment? And perhaps you could actually quote what you're trying to do with Todd in Morocco. Amal?
Amal, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, me, I have a question.
Go on, Valerie.
Yeah. Do you know sometimes a population who are reluctant against your
your formation?
Oh,
In what?
are coming into a place. So that's a very good question. The first thing that we do when we're approached about doing a project in a place is that, and this might be frustrating to a lot of locals, but it's one of the most important things that we need to do to ensure success in a region, is that we do not immediately say, okay, we're invited, let's bring our resources and start a pilot program. The first step in operating in a new region is simply to create a dialogue with all the local stakeholders that we can, as long as it needs to take, whether it be months even, or weeks, to find out what are the values there, what is motivating the people there, and what is it that people actually want there. So if we go into a place and we find out people immediately say things like, oh, you know, like don't start an anti-poaching program here or something like that, we want to know, well, why? You know, what is it that's going on? And a lot of the times, like in Sumatra, we would talk to people who are openly poachers and say, who would say, you know, we would do literally anything it took to give our children a future. Because right now we see that it's disappearing before our eyes, their future. And we want to, you know, be able to have them go to college, have an education, have a career. But right now, to get food on their plate every night, one of the only things that we can do after palm oil plantations have destroyed their economy and even their access to local water, is to work for people who are like the illegal wildlife traffickers, who will say, I'll give you money today to put food on your table if you go into the forest and give us these songbirds that we're going to sell internationally. And it's something that they say, well, we don't want to do it. You know, we would literally do anything else because we are seeing that we're emptying out the forests and we're seeing that we are destroying the only chance that our children have to survive. But if people put us in jail for it, then we literally can't feed our children that night. And so that informed us a lot about like why people would not have wanted an anti-poaching program in that region, for instance. And it told us, okay, well, you can't take away one thing without giving them something else. And so they wanted sustainable careers. They wanted a path for their children to have a future. And so by giving them the education, by giving them the retraining for former poachers and illegal loggers, to help people get careers in fields where they would not be bulldozing or burning or killing animals, it gave them something that they really wanted then. And then they would really invite us in to bring it and offer it to them. So that's a really important thing to do, is to start that dialogue so that you are welcomed in because you're providing them something that they want, that they ask for, that they need, but that no one has listened to them before about. And that you are, by providing it, giving them the option to help change that ecosystem for the better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Valérie. You can, if somebody wants to ask a question, you just need to raise your hand or activate your micro. Perhaps you mentioned earlier something about poaching and turning them from poachers into ranchers. Wild animal trafficking is a big issue. So perhaps Fabienne has a question or comment on this. Fabienne, can you hear us?
Oui.
You can ask it in French and Claire will help you.
C'était des questions un petit peu de braconnage, etc. Est-ce que c'est aussi du braconnage pour le trafic, je veux dire, d'animaux vivants? It's for...
The question was whether the poaching was for the purposes of wildlife trafficking, and it seemed as if it was from your description.
Yes. So in a lot of places that we operate in the world, whether it be Latin America, Southeast Asia, or now Africa, a lot of the poaching is for subsistence. A lot of the poaching you'll see is for people that just need to get food on the table that night, so they hunt an animal. However, even if a small percentage of the poaching that you come across is for wildlife trafficking, that becomes a huge issue, because that is a market that is now entering that region, and that is an incentive, that it becomes a financial incentive and becomes a career market. And so that's a big deal. And everywhere we go, when there is local poaching, when there are people that have forest knowledge, there are people that know how and where to look for animals to take that are local wildlife, then they are recruited by people who want those products internationally. And so we find that if we talk to the people who know the most about where and how to find a lot of these animals, a lot of the times they will be the ones that have been hired or are approached by international trafficking markets. Whenever we do an undercover wildlife investigation, like in Sumatra, with local groups to find out, like, okay, like who is taking these animals out of the wild and why, it's a really telling process, because it's the people in the community that are taking them out, even if they're selling them to an international market. Because even if you are a huge black market operation, you're going to count on the people that know how to get those animals, and that means locals. So yeah, it's the international wildlife market is going to follow you wherever you go, whenever you go to these precious places. As you know, the rarer something becomes, the more expensive it becomes, and thus the more sought after it becomes, and thus the more the locals are looked to in order to gather them. So yeah, it's a huge problem, and we have to solve it from all angles, from working with locals and local authorities to help investigate why and where it's coming from, where it's going, helping the people who are counted on to supply it with finding alternatives so that they don't turn to something that most of them realize is destroying their future. And also, you know, and this is more difficult, but you have to convince the end users not to buy these products. A lot of people think that, like, oh, you know, it's Southeast Asian, medicine markets that are the most users of these things. No, I believe it's the United States. That's the worst offender. That is the biggest consumer of illegal wildlife worldwide. So yeah, it affects us all, and that's why having everybody tell their stories and everyone being in the know about, like, you know, how this process works from beginning to end is so important.
Another question: do you know i4, the work of i4?
Oh yeah, yes. IFA, we have had, we are very, very lucky to have a very good relationship with IFA. They've helped us immensely when we, because, you know, our first project was in the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador, when Ecuador suffered a massive earthquake in 2016 that destroyed entire towns. We worked with IFA in Latin America to help the disaster recovery and help like bring back like the wildlife and help reunite people with their domestic animals, because domestic animals were not allowed in the relief camps, and just basically do a lot of work to help bring back this economy, because the local domestic animals left to their own devices in these destroyed areas became, you know, obviously very ecologically impactful. And somebody needed to help spay and neuter and reunite these animals with their parents. So we love the work that IFA is doing, and can't thank them enough for what they help us to do around the world to help save animals in these communities.
Thank you. And you think it's USA which qui est beaucoup le plus preneur. L'Europe, c'est pas un gros demandeur d'animaux sauvages. Quelqu'un peut traduire parce que moi je suis trop mauvaise en anglais.
Is it the United States which creates most of the demand for wild animals that are being captured?
Merci pour la traduction.
Yeah, I believe, and my information might be a couple years out of date, I believe we are, or at least very recently have been, the largest market for wildlife from internationally.
But I think also, Todd, also actually you have the Arab countries at the Middle East also are becoming now more and more demanding about wild animals, unfortunately, which is becoming really a huge problem.
Oh yeah, we should definitely talk about that more. Yes.
Yeah, I thought also China was not too good, to say the least.
Yes, yes,
but
that's true.
it's well, it's nice. It's nice to see that America has its own fair share of wild trafficking. All right. Perhaps what about volunteering? So I would like to ask Serena. Serena, do you have questions? I understand that you are into eco-volunteering. Perhaps you have a question for Todd?
Well, it's not, it's question and I'm thinking about things. So first, I was thinking about, I've seen the map where this shows a different project around the world. And my question is, do you do education program just in US? Because I think we need to act in different countries, but we also need to give some education for all people. So like in France, also as you are based in US, do you do education program towards people for just environment and animals?
Yeah, I think your home market, indeed, where the demand where the demand is, basically.
Yes. So yes, our humane education program is now the basis of all the rest of the work we do in any region in the entire world. So anywhere which we are operating, we make humane education a fundamental part of it now. So every new location that we work in starts with humane education first. And yes, we do work in the United States, and the need for the humane education here is very, very great. So we do have programs that teach, well, first of all, before we start that topic, the one thing that you cannot do anywhere in the world, whether it be the United States or the most impoverished countries, is you can't tell people what to do. You can't tell people what their values are going to need to be, etc. So and if anyone tells you what to do, you'll know why that doesn't work, because like, how do you respond when that happens? So the one thing that our humane education aims to do is to help children and adults learn how to think for themselves and how to come up with a best solution. So looking for solutions and teaching them empathy as a skill are things that helped all of these places that we talked about, helped all of the children come up with their own ideas, helped a lot of the locals come up with things that they wanted to do. In Sumatra, a lot of our teachers who were implementing the humane education program, they independently started making their own groups to look for people who had disabilities and start like accurately counting them and finding out all the people that were hidden in their community, which people didn't see before. The children who are rebuilding, their ecosystems and taking control, those are things that they discovered and realized they really wanted to do. I mean, children volunteering, around their Christmas vacation in order to rebuild a wildlife reserve is not something that we told them to do in our curriculum. But it's something that if we teach children how to think, and not what to think, but how they can critically think, how they can learn to think well, and how empathy is something that they can develop. They will learn, they will look for things, they will find ways to help, because children in communities, if all things are equal, people will want to usually choose what is best for everybody.
Okay. I have also just about your project. Yeah, it is very interesting. And I was really interested in the one in Madagascar, because I know there are only few organizations who are working for lemurs. So yeah, I think it's a global action you need to do just to work for their anti-poaching things because they use the meat of lemurs for them. So I know that, but yeah, you need to plant trees. So it's a massive work to do in Madagascar. So me personally, I am interested in, I don't know if there is something to do as a volunteer program. I can be interested in helping yours.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, and to the answer of that, there is everything that needs to be done, as you know. As you were saying, in Madagascar, the lemurs are critically endangered. There's all sorts of reasons why they are becoming endangered, from habitat loss to people poaching them for meat or bushmeat or for the illegal pet trade. For all of that problem, and for how big the problem is throughout Madagascar, in all of Madagascar, there are count them, two lemur rescue and rehabilitation programs. So we have our work cut out for us as far as who we can work to help and support. But as you're saying, it's not just about the lemur rescues directly, but we have to work with the communities. Like we're starting with when Tara went to Madagascar this summer and was working with communities to start up programs like lunch programs for communities that wanted to start school programs and things, giving them sustainability education, not just in the schools, but giving them an agriculture program for the school lunch program, so that there is an alternative to slashing and burning of the forests, for their sustenance or for commerce, and giving them alternatives so that the lemurs can keep their habitats and have a chance at the future. Because right now, for a lot of reasons, if you rescue a lemur, that lemur will most likely never be able to be re-released, often because of the experience that they've had was traumatic, or their injuries, or their diet has changed, but often also because there's simply nowhere to return them to, because the forest habitat loss keeps on going. So it's something that, well, if you want to create a program somewhere to help, all of these things will always need to happen, regardless of where it is, because everything works together.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question, Todd. How do you go about going to some country and trying to address their problem through your programs? Do they actually ask you, we've got an issue here, could you help us out? Do you actually go to them? Who do you talk to? How do you go about going to Madagascar, for instance?
Yes. So we most often get approached by communities that say, oh, we know you have this program. We really need that here because our habitat is disappearing, our wildlife is disappearing, and we have almost no economy, and both the people and the animals need a lot of help. We get a lot of requests for that all over the world. And so we have to be, right now at least, we have to be very selective about where we go, because we're a really small group. Even though we're all over the world, there's very few of us. All of us are volunteers here. All of us have day jobs. And when we go to a place, we're taking our own vacation time to go there and start these programs. And so it's unfortunate we can't be everywhere at once at the moment. But one of the things that we need to do in order to decide where to go is find out, okay, where is the need the most, and where is the need the biggest, and where can we make the biggest difference considering what we do? And so, like we were saying before, the first step is creating that dialogue with the locals there, because some people in the community might invite us, but it might turn out that a lot of the rest of the community might be very resistant to us, like Valerie was asking. And so we need to start the dialogue to say, okay, what is it that people want? What are their values? What are their motivations? And how can our program help this? And how can we work with them so that we can provide something that they want, which helps everybody's goal, which is to have a sustainable future for them all. And so then we will create a pilot program using the information from that. And then that'll often be a small thing, like with Amal in Rapad, Morocco. We're talking about our first pilot program in one school to find out how that goes. And then we always use scientific measures of success. We have teachers, we have scientists. We say, what is the conditions before we did this program? What are the conditions after it? How did this program affect what happened there? Did it have a positive effect? Did it help motivate the locals do more to help the local environment? Do the people work together more after this pilot program to help give each other a sustainable future? Was there a positive effect? If the answer is yes, then great. We can develop larger programs. We can do everything from the wildlife rehabilitation to the ecological restoration to the community development and education and school building. If the answer is no, like, or wasn't as great as we thought, fortunately, we haven't hit that mark yet where it just wasn't effective, but like we can find out, okay, what was it? Or what did we need to communicate? Or what was the difference in what was perceived and what was the reality that we need to adjust in order to make it more effective, and then do more pilot programs until we find something that works.
Okay, thanks. But how do those local communities with probably very scarce resources go about finding the money to actually fund your trip and so on? And do you have any ideas as to it's a $1 million question, I guess. How much does it cost? What, to give us some idea?
Okay, so a lot of our programs begin, so when we get to the pilot program stage, when we say, okay, let's go there, let's do these things. Obviously, plane tickets cost as much as plane tickets will. So from like the United States to, Puerto Rico or Latin America, it might be a few $100s. To Asia from the United States, it might cost, over $1,000 United States. Or if our volunteers are coming from New Zealand, then going from New Zealand to Indonesia would be a lot more inexpensive than coming from the United States, for instance. So plane tickets are their own animal, but that's a necessary evil for what's happening right now. As far as the program itself and how much the pilot programs cost, whenever we start a pilot program, we usually ask local micro-grantors like A Seed of Change or A Well-Fed World. These are wonderful like seed grant organizations that help seed programs around the world to help foster a lot of what we're talking about, bringing animals back from the brink, fostering more vegan and sustainable cultures and enterprises. And those could be anywhere from 1,000 United States dollars to maybe 10,000 United States dollars to start a program, being like school building or helping to build the capacity of a local wildlife rescue to find out if that helps make things more effective, to direct wild place ecological restoration and replanting trees and seeing if mobilizing the community to restore the environment has a positive effect. And right now, like, we count on a lot of small micro-grantors for this, but obviously it would be great if when we develop these programs like we have in Sumatra, and they're now creating their own artisan wares that they want to sell around the world to help support this business and their new sustainable enterprise, so that they don't have to turn to, for instance, palm oil plantations or illegal wildlife trafficking. If there could be an investment program to say, like, if you invest in this micro program, we are going to be developing eco-sustainable and animal-friendly enterprises locally in these communities that they want to sell around the world. That would be a great way that we could make each program a lot more independent and a lot faster by heading towards straight to the goal by making an investment program that way. So yeah, it doesn't cost much to start things up, but the whole plan is to use whatever seed it costs to grow sustainably, so that however large it is, that the program and the locals can keep it going on their own.
Okay, and my last question from me. Between the moment somebody contacts you and the moment you can actually be in the country doing what you're supposed to do, how long can it take? Because you did say that you've got work, you're working, so I guess it's probably not easy to plan in advance the holidays, because you probably have to go at some point in that countries to actually study.
Yes, so very good question. And it also brings me back to a question of yours, which I didn't answer yet, which was like, how did we get involved with Madagascar? So oftentimes, like you're saying, you know, it might take a few months or weeks to plan ahead our holidays in advance in order to go and start these programs or start like the long-term communications. However, a lot of that is not just saying, oh, when can I create holiday time? But a lot of that is dependent on how long the dialogue is with those communities to find out, okay, if we're going, what are we doing there? And like, what is the first pilot program that we need to do when we hit the ground? And that's often the thing that takes months to discover before we start doing, you know, planning our holidays in order to go there to build these programs. But for specifically, Madagascar, and you know, and fortunately some, you know, hopefully this will become more and more common, is that other people in common that we knew, in this case Lush Cosmetics, as we mentioned before, that was is a big grantor, they introduced us to other local groups that they knew were working in Madagascar, and they vouched for them. And by being introduced to people who already have a long-term dialogue or people that know the community well, that can cut down the time immensely that we would need to have a dialogue with the community to find out, you know, what is it that they want and need, and what are the things that would work there and not before we get started. So it could be anywhere from weeks to months before we get started, but the thing that tells us whether or not we can start hitting the ground running in a few weeks or not is how much do we know about that region, how much do we know about what would work there and what would be effective and what would be welcomed there by the locals.
Okay, thank you very much. One more question from someone.
Hi. Todd, I think it's wonderful what you do, and I teach children how to the empathy and respect of biodiversity is the right solution. I think, as you. I want to cast a question for you. If I want to buy a piggy store retail, can I?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Oh.
And please do, everybody.
Oh.
The Instagram link for Piggy's Tale usually has our website on there. It doesn't currently because it has Piggy's birthday fundraiser link on there. But let me share that. Or actually, Jan, do you have that? The piggytale.com link?
Yes, very good question. Go ahead. I've actually posted in the dialogue box the different links Todd referred to earlier. So you will find that link in the box, and I invite you to do a fichier file and record it on your computer. Otherwise, I will post that on our Slack channel. Okay. So yes, sorry, if somebody asked something, a question?
Thank you.
Has anybody a question? Last question? Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Todd. It was very interesting. We can pursue on our forum Slack channel. As you know, there's 150 people from different associations. Thank you very much, all. Next, as you know, there's a webinar every Friday. Next week, there will be 2 webinars, in fact, at 14 hours and 15 hours. It's going to be an investment fund around pet investment, pet tech, and a startup that develops software for animal shelters called Unimalis. So thank you very much. I'll stop the recording right now, and we can exchange informally between us. Thank you all.
Thank you.